He said the word underperformance like it was a diagnosis. I remember how the conference room clock hummed behind his voice, each tick louder than my pulse. Trent folded his hands, the picture of managerial control, while HR watched from the corner, eyes fixed on her tablet. My quarterly report, still sealed, lay between us. He never opened it. He called my projects inconsistent, my leadership limited. I wanted to defend myself, to point out that I'd salvaged 3 deadlines no one else could touch. But his mind was already made up. The paperwork had been typed days earlier. "We can make this clean if you resign," he said. I stared at the pen, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. Instead of signing, I slid the document back across the table and asked for the data behind his claims. He smiled, thin, practiced, dismissive. HR shifted in her seat. I walked out with my dignity and an ache that pulsed like static. In the elevator, I whispered into my phone recorder, "Document everything, Ava." Every word, every tone. When the doors closed, the reflection staring back at me looked like a stranger learning how betrayal sounds. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been in that same room, giving a presentation I thought would make my career. A cost savings plan, 20% off vendor spend, backed by 3 months of analysis. Trent sat there pretending to listen, his pen twirling like a metronome of disinterest. Halfway through, he interrupted with a grin. "Interesting hypothesis," he said, twisting my concrete numbers into theory. Laughter rippled around the table. Afterward, he called me in, voice coated in honey. "Ambition's good, Ava, but you're making waves. Stay in your lane." That night, I checked the shared spreadsheet. Someone had inflated the vendor's rates, erasing my margins. The revision log named his assistant. I took screenshots, zipped them into a folder labeled just in case. Over the next week, invites stopped coming. Side conversations bloomed when I entered the break room. It felt like someone had dimmed the lights only for me. I told myself it was office politics, that good work spoke louder than whispers. I didn't realize whispers had already become evidence waiting to be used against me. After the firing, I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car, rain streaking across the windshield, each drop a heartbeat I couldn't control. My hands shook so badly the keys slipped twice. The parking lot lights blurred into halos. I replayed the meeting, word for word, testing every sentence for sanity. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. But the HR email pinged before I'd even left the lot. Access revoked. Final paycheck processing. No misunderstanding. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling fabric, wondering how 5 years of loyalty could vanish into one staged meeting. My bag beside me felt heavier than usual. Inside it, my small insurance policy, a USB of reports, emails, timelines, proof of everything I'd done right. I whispered, "They think this ends here." That night at my kitchen table, I opened a new notebook and wrote, "Things they think I won't check." I underlined it twice. Below it I wrote one name, Bluefinch Consulting. I couldn't remember approving them, yet their invoices had shown up everywhere. The word consulting suddenly felt like camouflage. The next morning, I met Mia from Legal for coffee, a friend who spoke in careful ellipses. She'd heard the gossip, Trent telling people I couldn't handle scale. She rolled her eyes. "Classic projection," she said, then lowered her voice. "Parent company just finished buying us. They'll audit everything soon. Keep your receipts." Before leaving, she slid a napkin across the table. On it, "Track who benefits." It looked like nothing, but it became my compass. I spent that afternoon tracing Bluefinch's incorporation record, registered 6 months before our vendor restructuring. One listed contact, a consultant with no LinkedIn presence but several ties to Trent's alma mater. My chest tightened. The pattern was too neat. That night, instead of crying, I updated my resume and applied for an open position at the holding company's risk division. If I couldn't change what happened, I could at least stand where truth had leverage. 3 weeks later, an email arrived. Conditional offer, compliance analyst. I stared at it for a long time before opening. The interview felt like therapy disguised as protocol. "How do you manage conflict?" they asked. "By documenting outcomes," I answered. They smiled. My first assignment would be cost alignment for recently acquired subsidiaries, mine included. I nodded while my heartbeat tapped Morse code against my ribs. That night, I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen, staring at my old resignation draft. I burned it over the sink. The smoke curled upward like punctuation at the end of a painful sentence. Revenge wasn't the goal, restoration was. Still, as I watched the ashes drift, a small, dangerous calm settled in. I whispered to my reflection, "They taught you the rules. Now you'll use them better." My first day back inside the same building felt surreal. Same elevators, different badge color. I kept my head down. Claire, my new supervisor, was sharp-eyed and detail-driven. She handed me a spreadsheet the size of a small novel. "Start here. Cost controls for Division 14. Division 14 was Trent's. The universe has a sense of timing." Every evening I spread papers across my table, mapping flows of money like veins under skin. Blue Finch appeared everywhere. Training, innovation workshops, strategy retreats. Each invoice used identical language and round numbers. Sloppy. By week's end my wall looked like a detective board. In the center, I pinned one question. Who profits? When you start asking that, doors open themselves. I wasn't sure yet what justice would look like, but I knew I was walking its hallway. Late Friday, I stumbled on something obvious and damning, travel reimbursements overlapping with remote work weeks. The same 3 names, same hotel, same receipts repeated like copy-paste. I cross-checked corporate card statements. Trent's signature anchored them. It wasn't fraud on paper. It was arrogance wearing a suit. I drafted a neutral report, dates, amounts, policy references, and sent it to Claire. She read it, expression unreadable. "Good discipline," she said. "Keep everything factual." Her tone made it clear she understood more than she'd admit aloud. That night I walked home beneath flickering streetlights, half sick, half exhilarated. For the first time, I wasn't the hunted. I was the record keeper, and the record never lies for long. 2 days later, an anonymous clip landed in my inbox. Trent, drink in hand, laughing at the lake retreat. "Numbers are just stories if you tell them confidently," he said. The others laughed like it was scripture. I watched it twice, pulse fluttering, then uploaded it through the ethics portal with a simple note. Context: fiscal retreat, Q2 planning. No commentary. Facts would do the speaking. By morning, compliance announced routine alignment sessions. Corporate language, for we saw the smoke. I sat through the day pretending normalcy, but every keystroke felt electric. Truth was finally gathering witnesses, and I didn't have to shout anymore. The alignment call played like theater. Trent's video square filled the screen. Same grin, new nerves. "Great collaboration ahead," he said, pretending we hadn't shared a firing room. Claire introduced me as the analyst for cost efficiency metrics. His jaw twitched. When I asked about Blue Finch's measurable outcomes, he launched into jargon until the CFO interrupted. "Please provide written details." He promised to circle back. After the meeting, Claire asked quietly, "History there?" I nodded. He let me go. She blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then he's about to regret efficiency. For the first time, I felt safe enough to smile. Week 1 of the formal review unfolded like slow chess. I filed document requests, contracts, competitive bids, approvals. His coordinator stalled with polite emails, gathering details. I timestamped every delay. Late one night a hidden folder appeared then vanished. My autosync caught the file names, draft invoices cloned month after month. Patterns don't shout, they whisper in repetition. I compiled the list into a memo labeled preliminary consistency check. The next morning Claire skimmed it and murmured, "Neatly done." I spent lunch alone, watching sunlight bounce off glass towers. For years I believed silence meant weakness. Now I understood it could be strategy. By week 2, the trail pointed to a name, the registered agent behind Blue Finch, a college buddy of Trent's. Perfectly legal, fatally careless. I drafted a 1-page disclosure request, tone neutral enough to read as boredom. Facts travel farther when they don't sound angry. That night, I reread old emails, Trent's compliments, his empty promises of promotion. Each line felt like rust flaking off old metal. I wasn't bitter anymore, I was awake. People like him mistake composure for obedience. What they never learn is that composure is armor. I fell asleep with the laptop's glow fading on my face, dreaming of balance sheets turning honest again. Midway through week 3, Henry, Trent's coordinator, reached out. "Can we talk somewhere quiet?" At a diner off the highway, he slid a thumb drive across the table. "Internal decks," he said. "Real numbers." I asked why. "Because I'm tired," he whispered. The files showed inflated projections and buried losses. Lies measured in cells and columns. I told him to stay clear, that systems have ways of correcting themselves when truth enters the room. "Do they?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "They will." That night, I uploaded everything to the audit server, double-checking permissions. For the first time in months, sleep came easily. Justice was no longer theoretical, it was scheduled. The following Monday, audit requests began flooding in. Every document I had flagged was now under review. Trent's emails multiplied. Performative cheer, exaggerated professionalism. He wrote, "We're all on the same team here," copying half the leadership chain as though transparency could be faked by volume. I answered with brief confirmations. No warmth, no openings. Meanwhile, Claire whispered one afternoon, "You've stirred a nest. Stay factual." That night, I stayed late printing summaries, checking alignment across systems. It struck me that truth doesn't sprint. It accumulates quietly until there's no denying it. Around 9, a comment pinged from the CFO. "Excellent documentation trail, Collins." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. For 5 years I'd been invisible. Now my precision had a spotlight. It didn't feel like victory, just gravity doing its work. Audit called Trent for an informal clarification session. I sat at the edge of the room, official observer, silent note-taker. He started confidently, describing Bluefinch as partners in strategic culture shifts. The lead auditor asked, "Deliverables?" Trent hesitated. "They facilitate vision alignment." Translation, nothing tangible. The auditor looked at me, then back at him. "We'll need specifics." When the meeting adjourned, his face was tight with irritation. Outside, Claire murmured, he blinked. Back at my desk, Henry messaged. "They're deleting folders." Too late. IT already had archival copies. I wrote in my notes, "You can't delete gravity either." The next morning, a long email from Trent landed in my inbox, an accusation disguised as professionalism. He claimed a disgruntled former employee was feeding audit-exaggerated data. He copied executives, legal, HR, everyone who mattered. My cursor hovered before I typed. Attached are original source files, timestamps, and approvals as requested. I kept it to 4 sentences. Claire replied to all, "Thank you, Ms. Collins. Your documentation is exemplary." The thread went silent after that. Later, in the cafeteria, someone whispered, "She's the one Trent tried to throw under the bus." I kept walking, pretending not to hear, but my shoulders straightened on their own. Silence had become my rebellion. Audit elevated their probe into a comprehensive financial review. I was summoned to prepare a presentation. 6 slides, nothing fancy, patterns, numbers, controls. I stayed up late refining them, trimming emotion out of every sentence. The day of the meeting, I sat across from Trent again. His tie was perfect, his expression politely bored. As I spoke, he kept adjusting his cufflinks. When I finished, the CFO leaned forward. "So these gaps," she said, "are systemic?" I nodded. Documented and recurring. The room went quiet. Trent tried to smile. "Creative flexibility," he offered. The CFO's voice was ice. "We call that misrepresentation." When the meeting ended, I walked out calm but trembling. For once, the silence behind me wasn't dismissal, it was acknowledgement. 2 days later, the ethics department requested the original off-site clip. Someone had formally logged it as tone at the top. They wanted context. I attached my earlier memo, a single neutral paragraph. No commentary. When they thanked me, I almost laughed at the irony, how the same man who'd mocked my diligence now drowned in its precision. That evening, I sat in my apartment, lights dimmed, listening to rain. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the edges of vindication. Not joy, just relief shaped like stillness. I whispered into my recorder, "You didn't destroy him. You revealed him." The next week felt like holding my breath underwater. HR scheduled what they called a preliminary findings meeting. Everyone knew it meant confrontation. I was listed as a data witness. Trent entered last, smile polished, voice smooth. "We've all made clerical errors," he said lightly. The HR chair slid a folder across the table. "Yours amount to $240,000 in undocumented expenditures." His smile faltered. "Context," he stammered. "Explainable," he said again, softer this time. My pulse raced, but my face stayed neutral. When the session ended, he avoided my eyes. As we exited, he muttered, "Enjoy this while it lasts." I replied quietly, "Integrity tends to last." His footsteps quickened away. By Thursday, the decision memo circulated internally, temporary suspension of discretionary spending for Division 14. Effective immediately, all approvals routed through me. I read the line twice to be sure. I didn't gloat. I simply saved the PDF. Claire called me in. "You've earned this oversight," she said. I thanked her, though gratitude didn't feel big enough for what that moment meant. That night I walked home through city noise, every streetlight flickering like punctuation. The same building that had humiliated me now listed my name beside the word authorization. Justice, I realized, doesn't roar. It signs documents. The first request under my control came from Trent's team, funding for a strategy retreat. The same phrase he'd used months ago to mask luxury weekends. I review the file. Inflated hotels, questionable vendor codes, vague objectives. Policy gave me two options: approve or return for justification. I chose the latter. Within an hour, Trent called. "You're really going to nitpick every dollar?" His voice held false laughter. "I'm applying the same standards you approved," I replied evenly. Silence stretched, brittle. "Fine," he said. "We'll revise." When the call ended, I stared out the window, the skyline steady against dusk. Power used correctly doesn't intoxicate, it steadies the hand. Over the next days, revisions trickled in, accurate this time, stripped of indulgence. I approved them without comment. Around the office, tension thinned. People smiled again. Henry dropped by my desk, whispered, "You changed the air in this place." I laughed softly. No, the truth did. Still, walking those halls, I sometimes remembered the sting of that elevator ride months ago, the silence of shame. Now the same silence meant respect. In the cafeteria, someone clapped my shoulder. "Glad you're on our side." It startled me. I hadn't realized people had chosen sides. I just chose fairness. Audit's final report arrived in a sealed envelope. Claire called me in to witness. Pattern of weak oversight, personal interest conflicts, misrepresented reporting. It read. Trent's name appeared 9 times. Claire exhaled. "They'll proceed to HR next." I nodded, calm but trembling inside. Months of suppressed emotion crowded my chest. Anger, relief, grief. I returned to my cubicle, opened my old notebook, and wrote the final line under "things they think I won't check" done. I closed it gently. There was no triumph, only equilibrium, like a scale finally leveled after years of imbalance. The disciplinary hearing was swift. Audit spoke in evidence, not adjectives. HR followed policy. Trent argued context and innovation freedom. The panel listened, unimpressed. When the decision came, termination effective immediately, he didn't look up. I watched quietly as the man who once dismissed me gathered his files in silence. Later, a company-wide email went out. "We wish him well in future endeavors." The corporate euphemism for exile. That evening, messages filled my inbox, colleagues thanking me for standing up. I replied to each. I just told the truth. But privately, I whispered to my reflection, "You also reclaimed it." Weeks later, Claire called me in again. "The board's impressed," she said. "They're making your interim authority permanent." The words landed softly but carried weight. My title, Director, Financial Governance. I signed the letter without ceremony. That evening, I visited the old break room, the same spot where Trent once lectured me about staying in my lane. The vending machine still hummed. I touched the counter and whispered, "This lane's mine now." Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. I wasn't avenging the past. I was rewriting it into policy. Months later, our paths crossed again. He returned as a contracted consultant, stripped of rank, requesting my approval for a small project budget. He waited in my office doorway, hesitant. "Miss Collins," he began, voice fragile. "Need your sign-off." I opened the file. Clean, compliant, modest. "Approved," I said. He nodded, almost grateful. As he turned to leave, I added gently, "We'll follow the numbers." The same words he'd used to end my career. He paused, understanding flashing in his eyes. When he left, sunlight hit my new nameplate. I exhaled slowly, the way one does after surviving a storm. Justice hadn't shouted, it had simply balanced the books.